Welcome to the Embodied Self Podcast, a place for you to discover, explore, and embrace your truest expression. I'm your host, Ashley Pearl, and I believe wholeheartedly that the path to your most meaningful, joyful, and vibrant life is through becoming who you truly are. Join me as I share personal stories and have soul-expanding conversations alongside incredible humans just like you, with the intention to inspire your journey of personal exploration. We'll cover topics of self-development, wellness, spirituality, and so much more. And better yet, we'll share tangible tools and practices to support your most aligned life. So together, let's dive in and see what magic awaits on the other side of your most embodied self. Hello, welcome back, everybody. I have a treat for you today. I am sitting down with the wonderful and beautiful Ashley B. Jones. She is an intuitive reader, a Reiki practitioner. She uses various modalities in her practice, including tarot and energy reading and intuitive coaching. And her mission is really beautiful to empower others to find their truths and create space in their lives for soft and gentle healing. Love that, by the way, Ash. And to support people in transforming their lives. So Ashley, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. I think this is what we said to each other the first time we met was like, hello, Ashley. Hello, Ashley. And it's always fun to meet someone else who has the same name.
Yeah. And I remember in meeting you, which was in a really just perfect way, right? We sat next to each other at an event we were both at, and we started sharing our stories with one another. And there was so much just connection there. And I think we shared a lot of the same stories of what we were going through. And soon after, we were talking on the phone, and we had a lot of phone conversations where I was like, we gotta record this for my podcast that doesn't exist yet. So I love that we're finally here. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think the event we were at was authentic connection too, which just feels very divine timing and all of that, of the authenticity that people have when they connect. And I just love when the universe pulls strings like that.
Yeah, me too. Oh, that's so good. So I'm so excited to have you here and just to have a conversation with you and learn more about your story, because we've hung out a bunch, and I don't know your full story. And I think that a lot of people can really benefit from hearing, where you came from and where you are now. You, from what I can see and what I know, I believe that you live this, woo spiritual life. You practice with tarot and Reiki and energy healing and all of these things. And your background is in neuroscience as well, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And so I would love to just hear whichever angle you want to come at this with, right? Because I'm sure your story is so vast and there's so many elements, but share with us kind of where you were and where you are now. Like, how did you get here?
How do I get to who I am? How do any of us become?
Right.
So we can go linearly, I guess, through like the time of my life. So I was born in the Silicon Valley in California, right near Stanford. And when I was 2, my mom gave birth to my twin sisters, who their names are Gretchen and Eliza, and like the most pure angelic children ever. And when they were 2, they were diagnosed with something called subcortical band heterotopia, or double cortex syndrome. So in their brains, we have little like neurons, and then you have like the connection to other neurons, and they have too many cell bodies, so too many neurons in their brains, that it creates these layers that separate their neurons from connecting. So what happens, to get all scientific on you all already, is that when they can't connect, the energy, because our brains and our bodies are made up of energy, basically it bounces off and creates epilepsy or seizures in their brains. And they have pretty significant cognitive and developmental delays because of that. So since I was like 2, I, grew up with these 2 angelic children, but that had some pretty severe health issues. And, then I had my little sister who was born, and then my mom had cancer, and that really took it out when I was 9. And I I've always been like a major empath, I would say. I've always been very feeling and loving and caring. And I look at pictures of myself and I'm like, oh, little angelic child. But when you go through something really hard and your mom basically in your eyes disappears or like has this death of the mother figure when you're super young, it's a trauma that you go through. And I kind of see my life as my childhood as the before cancer and after cancer. And it was just really hard. Middle school is a horrible time. And when you then have like trauma and like chaos around you, and I'd wake up in the mornings and one of my sisters would be having a seizure. And it was just, it was my life, but there wasn't that security that I was necessarily craving or that any of us crave. And I, was going through life and trying to find myself and trying to understand myself. And I really wanted to understand why people are the way they are. I would say like that was why, like in high school, I took AP Psych and was like, oh my God, I love this. I want to know more. I want to know about the actual body. Like we have our behaviors, which is psychology of it. And I'm like, how does the behavior then integrate into who we are? Like, where does that sit? And meanwhile, I'm playing soccer and have a concussion because I go up for a header and I'm super aggressive and smash heads with this girl and end up having a pretty severe concussion. My mom, unbeknownst to me, is pretty woo, even though she has worked in the science field for her whole life and she survived cancer. She came back and she's all good now. But she, did breast cancer research. She's really heavy in the physical hard science world, but she brought me to a healer when I think I was 15 or 16, recovering from this injury. And I could feel the woman put my skull. She said that I had knocked a piece of my skull out of place and I could feel her put it back in. And then I could feel the feeling of like, oh my God, my headache's gone. I feel better. What's happening here? So simultaneously, I'm going really hard into math and science and taking all these really hard science classes and starting to have this introduction into this other world. And I ended up going to school in upstate New York, at Colgate University, where I decided to major in neuroscience because I wanted something more challenging and I wanted to understand more and I wanted to really get into the behavior and how does our brain really interact with our environment around us and what is the connection there between the literal organ that sits in the heaviest organ in our body. It sits in the top of our brain, our head, controls how we perceive, react, feel, experience the world, and how does that then affect the way that we interact and perceive the world. So I ended up graduating with a degree in behavioral neuroscience. And during, again, my formative years in college, I had some pretty traumatic experience happen to me as well. And had this reading with this woman my mom will talk to, who just saw me in a way that I don't think anyone's ever seen me, where I felt very misunderstood a lot of my life. I felt like people didn't see me, didn't understand my intentions. I couldn't really connect with other people my age, where I felt I wanted to go deep and I wanted to see people and I wanted to connect with them, but didn't really feel like other people wanted to go there or really understood that. And then they saw me differently and I just felt very misunderstood. Like I was almost living in like a mask or a suit that wasn't mine, that people weren't able to actually see who I was. And through a couple spiritual awakening moments, which is always accompanied by a dark night of the soul. It's never as pretty as the word spiritual awakening sounds. There's usually like a death that happens, a transformation. It's kind of like the death card in the tarot. It's not a scary card. It really symbolizes you're going through this transformative experience, kind of like the butterfly. You got to turn into goo in the chrysalis before you can become the new thing. And after that, I really just started feeling myself and experiencing myself. And, one thing that I had experienced through some of the trauma that I had been through was this inability to feel in my body. For someone who is so empathic and, you asked me, why did I choose whatever I choose? It's because I felt it. I'm super embodied. It's one of my strongest psychic senses, my clairsentience, my psychic feeling, ability to feel when I do healing work. And as a young kid, not being able to feel my body and feel myself and to be present and to be embodied and to feel grounded was like the most heart wrenching and dissociative thing that I could go through. And after going through this death experience or, transformative experience for myself, I ended up going to London to study abroad, and I met this friend of mine there, and she can attest to this. I was listening to this song by One Republic called Feel Again. And I was like, I'm feeling again, Steph. And she was like, okay, don't know you, but good for you. Like, I'm glad you're going through this. I only know you at this point, but it was so amazing for me to start to feel and experience and to interact with my body again. And that came with the slew of, it's kind of like if you're going through PT, you have to start to stumble and fall when you're starting to build yourself up again. And there's a lot of scraping of the knees, and there's a lot of lurching and, wow, I didn't realize I hadn't dealt with this. Like, this is, am I gonna, panic? Like, I suffered from panic attacks for a long time. There was a lot that was just bubbling up that I was learning to deal with that I had shut down for a really long time. And a lot of things my body had been screaming at me to look at that I had been ignoring. And, I explain now to clients that when we ignore our emotions, we ignore the shadow, and we ignore that part of ourselves, it's kind of like a angry toddler. If you try to control and shut out the temper tantrum, they're just going to start flailing and screaming, and it's going to aggravate the situation. If you can softly and gently offer space and validate and, like, I understand why you're feeling this way. I hear you. I see you. I'm present with you. Like, it'll start to quiet. And for me, a lot of the experience of coming back into my body over the next 5-6 years to where I am now has been a lot of like validating what I feel and allowing myself to be who I am and allowing the feelings to bubble up and to acknowledging the feeling for what it is. And that, shame is such a powerful emotion that, like, I shouldn't be this way, or I can't be this way, or this is wrong, or this is bad about me. And I think a lot of that, has transformed who I am. So I ended up finishing college, came back from London, finished my degree, graduated magna cum laude with a degree in behavioral neuroscience and a minor in women's studies or gender studies, because I really loved that part. Did my thesis on the religion's effect on the perception of female sexuality in our culture, and how religiosity and people's religious beliefs affected the way they perceived expressions of female sexuality, which is, it was a very interesting and I think provocative study to be run. I got to run a neuroscientific study. So I did an EEG. So you put nets on people's head and got to measure their brain waves. And it definitely ruffled a lot of feathers in the department. But I also feel like that's a little bit of who I am. I like to ruffle people's feathers, and I like to push some buttons in a light way. And, when I moved to New York City after college, I really just, that was the beginning of it all. I got there, was searching for community, which is something I think is so important in our lives, and met a mentor that trained me in Reiki, which totally changed my life. I had been suffering from anxiety and depression since I was 12 or 13, had been on medication since I was 14. And something shifted in me when I was trained in Reiki, and I was able to go off my medication and have been off since. And obviously I talked to my doctor, and everyone should always talk to their doctor. And I believe in science and I understand what it is, but there was something that happened and shifted in me that I didn't need. What was beneficial was no longer needed. And I think that for me, I was like, what did it do in my body? Like, what I wanted to be like, can I do, like, let's do a science study. Like, let me look at the genetics of it. Like, let me put an fMRI machine, put me in an EEG cap. Let me understand what shifted in me, because something did shift and I can feel it. And our feelings are energy, and they're part of our body. They're neurochemicals that our brain releases to make us feel and experience. Like there's something chemically, there's something physiologically shifting when we feel, when we do anything. And I then really I've been reading tarot since my spiritual awakening started in college, and really got into that. And then COVID happened, and all of this different stuff just kind of blew up in my life and really brought me into a surrender moment of, I really want to do this, and I don't know what's going to come after this. And I know that happened For a lot of people, I left my job. I was at home in California. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I'm interviewing, nothing's working out. And I think from there, I had another really transformative reading from my other teacher, Nikki Novo, who I adore, and went into her training program to do intuitive readings and just felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I love this. I feel really good at this. I can't imagine doing anything other than this. Like, this just lights me up. I feel fueled by this work. And from there, I just took leap of faith after leap of faith after leap of faith. And it wasn't comfortable. And it was definitely terrifying throughout the process, as any entrepreneur can attest to, of being like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm out here doing it. And I think I'm good, but I'm just going to keep going. And, you know, ended up moving to Colorado and built a business here. And I think that's really, I guess, the lineage of, or the linear story of kind of how I got here. Definitely a synopsis, and I'm happy to dive into anything else you want to talk about, but that's just, yeah.
Wow. I've had chills just like running through my body since you I mean the whole time, but really when you started speaking about the person your mom brought you to who did Reiki on you and you had the concussion. Ooh, it was like floods of energy and chills just moving through me. And thank you so much for just sharing all of that so beautifully, so openly. I mean, we've been friends for a little while now, and I don't think I knew 96% of that. So I thank you so much for sharing that with me and with our audience. And wow, thank you.
Yeah. And I do want to say too that, Reiki and energy work and everything really changed my life, that it hasn't made it so I don't have bad days still. And I don't have moments of like, wow, I'm exhausted, or wow, this doesn't feel right. And I think that a lot of what ended up happening once I was attuned to Reiki and I really had that another spiritual awakening moment, was that I used to joke when I was working at this job in New York City that I had an energetic allergy to the office space. I would have panic attacks in the office because I was like, it's the fluorescent lights, it's the people, it's the screens, it's the being around this. Like, there's something, my body is telling me something that it doesn't like where I am. And a lot of, any energy work, any healing work, therapy, like whatever type of healing work you're doing, it only works if you want it to. And it only works if you're using the tools that you're being offered. And that meant for me, like choosing to leave my job because it wasn't healthy for me, and choosing to take leaps of faith and to take baby steps and to take wild, hopeful dreams and be like, well, I have a friend who has posted this a couple weeks. Her name's Chelsea. She's an astrologer. And I just could not resonate more with the statement where surrender often looks a lot like fuck it. Mm-hmm. And I really think that that's how it felt for me, where I don't really have another option other than to listen to my soul that I had not listened to for years. I look back now at these moments where I was like, I intuitively knew in those moments that this was not a good situation for me. And the situation ended up being really not great because I wasn't listening to my intuition. And it's been years of learning to trust my intuition again after gaslighting and being told that my emotions aren't reality, that the way I feel, my intuition is not truth. And it's been a lot of personal work for me to come back into, no, I trust myself and I trust this feeling. And even in the moments where I still get anxious and I still have experienced fear, I'm like, what's going to happen? And it's a practice of returning back to like, no, I trust that I am protected, and I trust that I am okay. And I know that I am okay. And I choose to not believe anything other than I am okay and I am safe and that I know best about my life. And for me, that's really why I do the work that I do now. I think this world is super disempowering, that our power is taken from us in many different ways, in many different situations, systematic, societal, communal, down to the individual level, down to the personal level of the way that we interact with each other. And a lot of us, when I see what the problems are, is there's this imbalance of power in our bodies, this lack of security and this lack of trust in our own energy and like force fields. And ability to feel empowered and strengthened and in charge of our own lives. And I think that for me, that's why I do what I do now, is to offer
Yeah.
people that space to feel empowered and to feel strengthened and to feel like they know themselves and they feel connected to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 100%. And just to go back to an earlier part of your story that you shared, I can't even imagine, growing up in a home where, your mother was dealing with, cancer and all of these things, and then your twin siblings were dealing with what they were dealing with, and the amount of, for so many reasons, right? Like, I'm sure that a lot of the attention,
Mm-hmm.
understandably so, went to your mom and to your siblings, right? Because they had things going on. And where did that leave you, and what needs did you have that were unmet? And you mentioned that you had panic attacks and you struggled with anxiety and things like that, which of course, right? Like, I can only imagine what was stuck in your body for so long until you started working with it. And I think there's so many people that are living with that still today that don't really know how to navigate that, or how to pay attention to the signs that their bodies are giving them. I resonate so much with what you said about going to your job and having an energetic
Allergy.
allergy. I would get panic attacks. And I didn't know this until looking back, because that's how disconnected I was to my body and the messages it was sending to me. And, the show is called the Embodied Self Podcast. And it's through connecting back to your body and the messages that it sends you that you start to work through all of these things that have been shouting at you for so long. And same, I used to get panic attacks on the train, on the L train in Chicago to my corporate job that I had right out of college every single day. And I just kept making, like, I kept changing my life so that I would try to, like, I was like, maybe it's the train itself. Let me not take the train. Let me bike. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was that. And it's like, no, your soul was screaming at you. It was screaming at me to get out of that situation. There was something else that I was meant to be doing here. And so, yeah, I know you mentioned openly as well that, you struggled with anxiety and depression and things like that. And I'm curious, your journey of kind of, again, we have like Western medicine on one side, and then we also have spiritual, the Reiki, the energetic. And I think you beautifully blend both of those and hold both of those in a way where you're not pinning one against the other. You're saying, hey, we're all meant to be here together. Yeah, I'd love for you to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I really see them as two sides of the same coin. I often, rather than Western versus Eastern or Western versus Woo, think of it as like modern versus ancient.
Mm,
And that is the dichotomy, that there are these fundamental practices that interweave so beautifully with, modern medicine. And I am the person who will go read the research studies, who did the deep dive into the CIA research on like psychic abilities in the 70s and 80s. I am the one who, I love to hear, because we are all intuitive as humans. This is not we all have our own superpowers. Like, this is our way of understanding the world that was really snuffed out by this patriarchal and hypermasculine energy. And this is a whole different conversation, obviously, that we can dive into, which always, I feel like every time we talk, I'm like, all of the topics.
all of
But
them.
when I think about why, like, I think there's a book or something, but like, why woo woo works, like, why does spirituality actually work? What is happening? There's so much research being done now, and there, with this breadth of spiritual awakening that we're all going through, like, how do I find myself? I don't like my life. I don't like the world around me, especially with coming out of COVID, of being forced to sit with ourselves and be
Yeah.
like, wow, do I like the life that's around me? Do I like the people? I think that, not that I think, I know we are conditioned from a very young age of what does success mean? How do we succeed in this world? You get good grades. It's external validation. You get good grades. You go to college, go to a good school. You graduate from the good school. You get a good job at this top firm. You earn a lot of money. And if that calls to you, that's one thing. But we are not taught to follow what our soul actually says. And I remember being like, I don't know. I can see the classroom physically. I think I must have been like 11 or 12, in middle school, and there was this girl who just like would never take her tests, and she would just draw pictures all over them that she could never get her to actually do the work. And I was sitting there as the people pleaser and teacher, teacher's pet that I am, like being like, oh, you're not, why aren't you just doing the work? Like, why don't you try harder? Like there was this part of me that had learned, like, if I can prove that I'm worthy of validation and of praise from others, that will mean that I am a good person and that I am succeeding. It's the reward circuit in our brain of dopamine and these different things that happen of like, if I do this, this is the result. So I will keep doing this because that I want the response. And it wasn't until I really graduated from college and was like, wait, none of this matters. And I feel like that, we have those midlife crisis as energy. It's really this awakening of like, wow, I haven't been living in alignment to what I actually wanted. I've been doing what other people told me I should be doing. And I think that people come to it after a really long time and come to it early, but there is that fear of, can I reject society to honor myself? That becomes this really large friction point of, wow, I know this doesn't feel right. Like your story of you on the train or maybe all bike or whatever it is, and like experience these panic attacks of your body and your soul being like, I don't like this. But we are taught in our minds that my body is just a thing that helps me live. It doesn't say anything to me. Like I'm just going about, we're not taught to like honor our gut instincts. We're not taught to like emotional awareness or emotional intelligence in school. We're just taught how to be logical and take tests and do things that will make us good little robots in society. And obviously society needs to work and all the function, but if we were taught from a young age, hey, honor yourself. What do you actually want to do with your life? If someone had said to me when I was 16, yes, you can be a professional singer. Like, I think the validation and the reaffirmation that we want of being able to be seen. I mean, looking back on that was just a me wanting to, my throat chakra wanting to be unlocked and to be able to communicate my truth was really the desire to sing and write and just have things pouring out of me. And I've always loved to sing. I guess it's another little tidbit you didn't know about me. I was in an a cappella group in college, which was a huge healing experience of me being able to sing and be praised and to be myself, and for people to like that version of myself, I think is a really huge healing experience where humans are communal, social creatures that are meant to be in community. And I think that now, I have a friend who's living in New York City who is just coming to the point where she's like, I don't know what I want to do with my future. I worked this job I told I was supposed to work, and I'm at this point where do I go from here? And I think that that's a moment where, tarot as a self-reflective tool can be super helpful, and Reiki can be really, energy work can be really helpful because you're unlocking something in your body. Tarot is more of there's two different ways we heal. There's the top-down approach of I know, so I experience the world differently, or I feel, so I know, and now I experience the world differently. When you combine the two together, like I feel differently and I know differently, so I am differently, is why I really do the healing work and the reading work. So the embodied physical touch work within the body work and then the mind work. And for her, I'm like, start journaling, because no intuitive, no healer, no psychic, no therapist is never going to tell you something you didn't already know. They might phrase it in a way that brings awareness to it for you. They might shine a light on it from a different angle that you hadn't seen before, but no one should ever, or no one who's really doing what they're doing is ever going to tell you something that you did not already know within yourself. It might be a very quiet part that you've been ignoring, but then they shine a light like, oh, that's what that is. Or it might be a part that you're like, wow, I didn't actually want to look at that. That was something I just shoved in a cupboard that I knew, but have been willfully ignoring. But everything that people are reading and understanding is something that lives within your life that's going to allow you to transform and allow you to self-understand so that you can do the work for your own life, that you can be empowered to change your own life. Because that, I mean, looking back on all of the personal work I've done, the crying in the showers, the screaming into a pillows, the wildly shaking my body in my apartment that I've gotten into of really honoring my body, I am there is nothing I am proud of more than the fact that I saved myself. And there's nothing more rewarding than the feeling of pulling yourself out of darkness. And it doesn't mean you need to do it alone. It does not mean other people cannot stand there and shine lights and offer you the way and guide the way. But the feeling of the rewarding and the soul affirming experience of doing it yourself, like that is a strength and a muscle that can never be taken from you.
Yes. Oh, that was so beautiful and good. There's so much goodness in everything you just shared, but the thing that's sticking out to me the most is this idea, and it's a truth, right? It's not an idea, it's a truth, that everybody has the ability to heal themselves and guide themselves and do everything that you just shared. And what I love about the world of, coaching, especially, and everything else that you and I both do, is that we're not here. We don't know more than anybody. We're not here to say, oh, okay, this is your problem, let me give you advice. And there are coaches out there that are doing that. And so if you're listening to this, be aware that if anyone's telling you that they have answers to your problems or that they're going to heal you, run fast in the other direction.
And I know that it can feel like, especially when you're at a place where you're like, what, and pardon my French, like, what the fuck am I going to do? I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't know where to go. I don't know who I am. I don't know anything. I just want the answer. Like I, as a kid who used to give up on video games because they weren't easy enough to figure out, understand that. I've never touched a Rubik's Cube because I'm like, the energy and effort that goes into that, it's not for me. But yeah. I understand. And like, I have felt that desire. I'm like, just someone give me the answers. Someone tell me what to do. And the truth is that no one can. Like they can offer you tools to journal, to reflect, guidance, healing work to support you. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. We're supporting your growth. But the experience of growing, I joke often that humanity, being human, is boot camp for the soul. That we're sent back to earth to work through something that we did not work through previously, to experience life. That humanity, it's a beautiful, wonderful, dark and icky, but in that darkness, stunningly magnificent experience of light and dark, and the contrast that brings, and the color that comes from, if you think about the wheel of color, and black is all of the colors combined in one. It absorbs energy as a color, and white as none of them, and it's reflective. That together there is this beautiful spectrum of colors that we can see and experience the world, experience to taste good food, to laugh until your belly aches, like to cry and experience what it means to be human. It is boot camp for the soul. We are growing and building, and through that, releasing patterns so we don't have to learn them again, doing things to strengthen ourselves, to follow this call and to be in alignment. And, it's not easy, but that's where I think, for me, the spirituality comes in of, wow, this is kind of greasing the wheels. This is like a life hack. I thought that a lot when I started doing this work of like, why do we not talk about this more? Like, this is making this experience of healing easier. I can speed up my healing experience. I don't have to do this alone. There is a way for me to be using tools that are actually going around. Like, I don't have to take the long way on this. I don't need to punish or suffer. Yes, this might mean I have to like do harder work in a shorter period of time, but that means it's a shorter period of time. And I think that for me, when it comes to, the science of it all, the embodiment of all, that when I was in school, I remember taking this class called Cognitive Neuroscience, where we talked about the brain. But the more you talked about the brain, the rest, we don't really know anything. We know some stuff, but we know very little. And there's this aspect of our brains that's called plasticity, that our bodies have the abilities. So our neurons are always shifting and moving the connections. Where we put our energy, and when we strengthen, like building a new skill, learning something new, it's basically our neurons, like my friend and I was just like high-fiving and becoming friends. They get to connect, and you can change the behavioral pathways in your brain and the way your genes are expressed, the way your body experiences things, the way you react to things. And yes, there are subconscious triggers, unconscious triggers that get triggered. And that's where what I see, the work that I do with readings and with healings especially, is repatterning these neural pathways to our body through somatic experience to be able to rewrite the way you experience your life and to release what has been stuck energetically in your body and maybe clogging the tubes or clogging the pipes or creating tension or creating darkness or just being really heavy that's slowing you down, to allow you to rewrite those patterns and to repattern in a way that feels safer and almost in an accelerated way. Same thing that goes with coaching. You know, you're understanding something differently, you're being validated, you're repatterning something in your brain so that you're able to then experience the world in a new way. And through that new experience, change the way you see your life. And then it changes your entire life. I was saying this to someone yesterday where I really believe that all healing comes from the center of self. Anything that you want to change in your life comes from changing something within you or unveiling something new or validating something within you. If you want a new job, affirming within yourself, I deserve something better, the better thing will show up. If I start to see goodness appears. And that's not to say, I think a lot of times it's like love and light and just think positively. And I remember hating that as a kid because I was like, my mom would always say, like, look at the glass half full. And I was like, the glass is half full, but it's also half empty, but it's also all full, but also all empty. Like the glass is just the glass. Like, why are we trying to look at the glass other than what it is? Like, can we just be grateful and also be like, this needs to be changed? Can we acknowledge that things are good, but also be like, they could be better, or I'm still uncomfortable? And I think holding that dichotomy of contrasting emotions can be really uncomfortable, of like, I want it to be all one way. I want it to be in this dichotomy of like right and wrong, which is unfortunately not how the world works. Wish it was. It's very complicated. But I think about being able to hold space like that and how letting it all sit in front of you gives you that the validation and that perspective, really.
Yeah. Yes. Everything that you're sharing, and you did such a beautiful job of explaining how all of it works and how healing does have to come from within and from the center of self. And to me, it really is this process of guiding or learning how to become more empowered and take your power back, because there's so, and that phrase is used a lot. And so I want to go deeper on what that actually means, right? There are so many ways in which from the moment we're born and young, and you shared a lot about this, our power is given away, right? Our power is given away at school when we just depend on people to tell us like what's right, what's wrong, what's success. Our power is given away even in the way our bodies respond to things like traumatic events or experiences, right? Like there's some aspect where we don't have control over the safety mechanisms that are built, right, in response to things that happen to us, right? If I'm someone who has OCD, or if I'm someone who gets, really debilitating panic attacks, and that was me for a little while, I felt powerless. I felt powerless. And so the process of taking your power back is to look and see all the areas where you're experiencing unnecessary suffering. And I say unnecessary because I do believe that a lot of suffering, of course, there's horrible things happening in the world and every day, but I'm talking about the internal turmoil of being in a life that you really don't like, or having those visceral body responses to things like your job, or maybe it's your partner, or maybe it's, something else, whatever. It's so beautiful to start to learn those tools and practices. And it's going to be a different, cocktail for everybody. For you found that the mix of tarot and the readings and the self-reflection, as well as the embodiment work and the Reiki, the energetic aspect, and probably much more, those all have allowed you to become, to live your most authentic way of living, and to live with what seems like, really joy. Yes, there's bad days too, but joyful and I mean, for anyone listening, please go to the YouTube and watch as well, because Ashley's just so, you have these perfect movements, and I love learning about the brain and the neuroscience, and the way you're doing it with your hands. It's just making a lot more sense to me. So go watch. but yeah, I guess to bring us to a close here, for anyone who's listening to this and they're like, wherever maybe they're at the beginning where they're feeling like there's something more for them, but they're in that, like, I don't know where to start. Someone just tell me what to do. Do you have any advice or any, I don't want to say easier, but yeah, something that could support them in starting this journey or, yeah.
It's baby steps. And I know that being able to quit your job is a privilege, being able to invest in this kind of work is a privilege, that not everyone is able to access that, this work. And I think that if I could think of one place to start, it would be choosing yourself in one moment. In this moment, if I don't want, let's say you're at the grocery store. You're like, oh, I don't know what I want for dinner. Do I want this? No. Like, instead of thinking like, I should have this is what's healthy for me, asking your body in that moment, do I want to do this? If someone invites you to go out for drinks, rather than being like, I need to go out to see this person, do I want to do this? Yes or no? And I think starting with those, I know I just had this whole spiel about the dichotomy, but starting with the simple yes or no questions for yourself and trusting the gut instinct in the minute. And I understand, like, FOMO is so real. Anxiety, people pleasing, these behaviors are so real. But I think in those moments, if you can get a little bit outside of your comfort zone, of like, what's something today where if I did this differently, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but it's going to be a lot worth it. And how is this me choosing myself and honoring myself in this moment? And I think for me, that's like the greatest way you can start to really embody and connect with yourself, is by trusting and listening to those cues. And if you're feeling like, I have no idea what my body is saying, like I have emotions, but I don't know what they mean, where do I start? I think putting pen to paper too is one of the most healing things. It's actually what I did it's just very funny looking back on it all. I did my thesis on for my women's studies major, my minor in women's studies, was I had people write anonymous letters to people, anonymously written, anonymously delivered. It's called the Dear You Project. And writing on paper, somatic expressive writing, is so healing because you're externalizing a feeling. You're putting it out of you. I think that is the other way that we can really find clarity, is by just, rather than keeping it cooped up in our minds and our bodies and in our heads, allowing it to just flow and writing truths onto the paper of like, I feel this way. I am upset about this. This upset me. Putting them onto paper, validating yourself in these moments can be the most healing experience. I think that getting out on a hike, getting out to nature, going for a walk can also be really grounding. I know I love to ski just because there's something within me that quiets when I hit the slopes and I'm so focused on my body that I just get back into it. Actually, let's do it right now on the podcast. There's a meditation that we can do right now, that I do every morning to ground myself and protect my energy, to really listen. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you'll see my hands doing funky things. I'm just symbolizing what I'm saying. But take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just allow yourself to start to settle into the chair or the ground. Maybe you're walking. Starting to create awareness around your body, the space around you. Just observing and noticing how you're feeling. Let's take another deep breath in through your nose, filling all the way up, and sighing out your mouth. Allowing your body to just settle. And I want you to imagine that there is a ball of white light above your head. Maybe you want to throw an intention in it. Maybe this ball of white light looks a little glittery, maybe it's shimmery, maybe it's warm, maybe there's a color tinge to it. Whatever it is, if you don't see it, maybe you feel it, maybe you just know it's there. Just allow it to start to come through the top of your head and start to fuse and integrate with everything that it touches. Down through your forehead, the back of your head, down your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth. As the light fuses and pours down your throat, to your shoulders and down your biceps, into your elbows, down your forearms, into your fingers and the palms of your hands. So they almost start to glow, as if the light starts to just shimmer out of them. As it again moves down through your heart, your chest, down your back, your spine, into your lungs, into your stomach and your organs, down into your hips, down to your tailbone, down your thighs, to your knees, down into your calves, into your ankles, down into your feet, your toes, as this light turns into roots that start to anchor you and sink deeply from the bottom of your feet into the ground beneath you. As you just breathe, as you feel like the roots are growing deeper, there's awareness of you and your body. Just noticing what it feels like. Not needing to move or shift anything in this moment. Just allowing yourself to be in your body for this moment, in this place, to feel connected deeply to yourself. And I want you to imagine that there is like a bubble. This is an energetic force field around you, egg-like, that goes up, impenetrable in its strength, so that nothing can come in. Everything that's not yours bounces off of it, but you can still see out and navigate the world, protecting you, securing you in your body and in your energy and in this space. When you're ready, you can start to bring movement back into your hands and your body and your fingertips. If you've been walking, you can just keep walking, keep noticing, taking another deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, shaking, doing whatever just feels good in your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
I feel so grounded.
It's my favorite way, really, to drop back into my body. And I know that when you're doing that meditation, sometimes you're like, wow, this is really tight and this feels uncomfortable. And I would encourage you, if you're listening and you're like, okay, well, what do I do about that, Ashley? Mm-hmm. Just witness it. Hold space for it. Notice it. Maybe you feel called to journal. Maybe you feel called to just be like, what is that thing that feels really uncomfortable? Why does this place in my body feel really icky? How can I just allow it to be? And from there, how can I listen to what it's saying to me? And then trust it and validate it in the same way that we just want to be listened to and honored and our truth to be heard by others. How can we listen to our body's truth and validate it? And then do what it's asking us to do in the little ways. You know, it doesn't have to be, hey, go blow up your life and move cross country if that's what came to you in the meditation. more power to you. Do whatever feels good to you. But in those moments, in that place of, I trust myself, I trust my body, I trust what it's telling me, and I honor my practices, and I honor myself, and I honor my truth, that is what the beginning looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's just this like wild, mysterious roller coaster journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if I could offer anything to anybody, it's, you're not alone. It's okay for this experience of being human to be hard. It's hard for everybody. You don't have to do it alone. And you are deserving and worthy of healing and of happiness.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
I am on Instagram at ashley.b.jones. My website is ashleybjones.com. You can reach out to me in either way. I would love to DM you or connect with you, or just explore what you feel like is best for your healing journey. And we're just like, wow, that was really cool what you talked about. Feel free to DM me. I'm an open book when it comes to stuff. You could, Ashley knows this too, the other Ashley that's here, that we could have a 5-hour conversation about all of these topics. That I really, if you're looking for a place to start, you're not alone. I'd be honored and happy and grateful to support you in any way that you might need. We can kind of go from there.
Amazing. I'll put all of that in the show notes so everyone can have an easy path to finding you. And thank you again for being here. I know that your story and your wisdom, the wisdom that just flows so naturally through you, is going to reach all the people that are meant to hear it. And yes, receive that. I could feel you receiving that.
I will receive.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was such a blessing, and I'm grateful. I'm just excited to see all that's coming from you too. And I know we've been talking about this wonderful podcast coming to fruition for a while, and it's just so amazing to see you doing what you're supposed to be doing, and shining your light, living your truth.
You.
So
Thank you
much
so
love.
much.
Yes.
Much love.